conversations. Let's have real conversations.
Get ready to stir it up.
Life events and everything in between. Let's go.
Get ready to stir it up.
No capping. If guests got you covered right up.
Get ready to stir it up. Stir it up.
Come on.
Get ready to stir it up.
Hello viewers, welcome to another episode of Stir It Up. Today I have an amazing guest, Sonia Bozo. We're going to be talking about things that women get away with, that men could never get away with. And it'll be interesting to see what his thoughts are, and let's see where it goes. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Kia. Thank you for having me on your podcast.
I always say that I drag people here kicking and screaming. So how much screaming did you do to arrive here?
Not a lot.
Not a lot. Good. So I'm getting better at this.
I like talking.
You like talking, as I do. So maybe we kick off from a bigger or broader perspective around gender roles. I think we all see that over the last couple of years, gender roles are changing. You have more women in the workplace. You have men beginning to have dual roles in the family. Thoughts? What do you see changing? Do you see it blaring up a lot? What are your gender thoughts?
It is blaring up, and it's been blaring up for some time now. I think the moment that women became active in the workplace, that was bound to happen, because then, in addition to earning power, there's also the issue of progressively we as a culture and as a civilization have become to realize that mindset of a woman belongs here and a man belongs here is not progressive.
Do you see us being able to go with the flow?
When you say us, you mean?
As a culture, as a people, globally, wherever you want to look at it from.
I think globally there's a struggle, but it differs from state culture to state culture. So if you take the America or the Scandinavians, they're better able to do the flow. The conversation in America is deeper than in Scandinavia. In Ghana, when we come to Ghana, I think it's an interesting mix. We as a culture tend to mimic without thought. I know I'm going to come under kosh with this, but that's true. So you can see us flow, but then the question is, are we flowing because we understand where we're going, or we're flowing because, like we usually do, we are mimicking what we consider as the vanguard, people who are in the vanguard of this movement? I'm not sure. The jury's out.
I can agree with you on the jury being out to a certain extent, because you still find a lot of families expecting women to behave a certain way. And even if you're a working woman, there are certain expectations of you within the family, within the family unit. And then even with men, there are certain expectations, but some of them become even flexible as you go along. So in as much as we appear to be going with the flow, there's also an element where we're still holding back to quite a lot of our strong cultural norms and thoughts.
Yes, so you have two opposing factors, and you rightly identify them. There's the mimicking, but there's also, as said, there's an atavistic urge to be conservative, because our society is conservative. So here you have somebody who's online, is wide open to the outside world, sees what's happening, wants to do that. But then there's a part of him, not only society, but a part of him, we are creatures of culture. So there's a part of him that is unthinking, that is unreflecting, that is tethered to conservative mores arising out of his culture. And so the person is a tense clash of pools.
There's a lot of internal conflict that person has to deal with in themselves.
And sometimes they're not aware that there's that. When you're aware, it's one step.
Yes.
When you're not aware, there's internal conflict and you have no idea what's pulling you apart.
Yeah. Interesting. So you've seen the social experiments on social media where You see a man hit a woman or pull her or, be a bit aggressive with her, and suddenly everybody around them reacts to it, right? The man might even get hit himself by another person. And the reverse happens, and you would see a woman hit a man or drag him down the street or, be very verbally abusive or whatever. And everyone reacts. And you'd find that a lot of people will say that's a double standard, or that's not fair, or that's not right. Thoughts?
I call it that chivalry is a one-way street. So chivalry, as defined or as we understand it, is supposed to be a man being courteous to a woman. We don't establish the same expectations of women. Don't ask me why. I think that is also at the heart of when we say that what is the movement called where women do not want to be. If you open the door, what's it called now? If you open the door, we the women can do it. You shouldn't be opening the door for you're being
almost feminist.
Almost feminist. Okay. So you ask yourself that, well, if that's the case, where does chivalry begin and where does it end? And then the next question is, if we are all equal and therefore we shouldn't be treating women differently, what about you? The experiment basically exposes the flaw in the thinking that by the same token, if a man is being manhandled and you feel that then you should, but we don't. Again, it comes back to that tension. Yeah. And I think that our conversations in this space is not as informed as it should be. There's no right or wrong answer. For me, I come to issues and I'm not thinking what is wrong, what is right. It's awareness, creating awareness and thinking through your knee-jerk reactions and your reflex actions and you're responding to societal pulls, just being aware.
You find that it happens everywhere. So it happens in Ghana, it happens in Congo, it happens in the States, it happens in the UK. So we don't have the excuse of culture there. It's just different standards that men are measured against versus women. And I have a friend who says women get away with murder. If you were to just sit back and think about things you think women get away with, that no one does anything apart from this social experiment that I just talked about, what would come to you?
I mean, the first one, of course, is the assault and it's flirting.
Ooh, okay.
And objectifying people. I mean, women will come down hard on you if you use language that suggests that you're objectifying a body part. They don't feel the same shackles in a woman objectifying men. And again, I don't blame them. What I want to introduce into that conversation is that to the extent that you're blindsided by things that you have no control of, this urge, you're nurtured in a certain way, there's a historical legacy to the way in which you perceive things and do. The same charity should be extended to men.
So it's almost like a man sees a woman and thinks, oh, she's beautiful. He couldn't physically touch her, or he couldn't say, oh, I like your arms are nice and slender.
And he shouldn't touch her.
And he shouldn't touch her.
But the same token, the woman shouldn't.
But a woman will say, oh God, your arms are really so
lovely.
And then
Can proceed
I touch
to
them?
touch you.
And then they proceed to touch
and everybody's happy and laughing.
Yeah. And but the thing is, the men don't mind. But the women mind.
We're beginning to mind.
You're beginning to mind. Tell me a bit more about that.
We're beginning to mind only because we see the inherent discrimination. So at a superficial level, we probably enjoy the touch. But when you step back a little bit and you start thinking about the repercussions if you did the same, then that double standard begins to irk. Okay. If you reflect on it, if you go with your
carnal
impulses, that you wouldn't mind.
When I think about a man objectifying a woman, do you see it as the same way? Do men objectify women the same way that women objectify men?
I can't step into the shoes of a woman. You should tell me that. But let me just go on there. I think that when a man objectifies a woman, a lot of the time, I can speak from a man's point of view, it's probably carnal. But there's also an element of aesthetics. I mean, we men, I haven't seen a man who says, I don't like the curves of a woman. They may want it in different sizes, but they enjoy the curves. I think that women equally would enjoy the muscles, you tell me, the muscles of a man, the fitness of a man. But I think that for men and women, it probably will be the little difference is that they impute carnality into ours, whereas we don't necessarily impute carnality into when a woman does that.
Got it. So it's almost like the intention behind the action.
The action.
Right? So for women might be saying that when he says that, the transition from that thought to an action is the distance is very short, right? So if he says that means that's what he wants to do. But if I say it's harmless, I don't mean anything by it.
You may accept that in the exchange, in the contractual thing between a man and a woman, the men are supposed to come chase after you.
Should women be held more accountable for some of these things? Because, I mean, you talked about, for example, the assault and just objectifying men, right? But I also see that a woman can get away with saying that I don't want to work. I want to be at home and take care of the kids, right? Falling back into original or traditional gender roles. But a man couldn't say that, right? And even though times have changed and we all know that having a dual income is useful and it's helpful in the family setting, a woman can get away with that. Do you think that it's, what are your thoughts in terms of should women be held more accountable for some of the things that they do that men couldn't do?
So I think you're alluding to housewife and house husband and how society frowns or do not frown on.
Let's talk about that for a minute. Let's talk about that for a minute.
I think what you're saying has the practical transition is that you're talking about the
abstractness of it.
But that's what it means
that's
practically.
A good, yes.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And I've always told my friends that I don't have a problem being a house husband. Actually, I'd love it. And maybe I'd love it because, I mean, if I started being a house husband without my profession, I probably would resent it. But I'm trying to be, balanced. I've done enough in my profession to decide that, look, I could do with a house husband if there's a lot of money coming in.
You could do with a break.
I could do with a break, absolutely. Couldn't we all?
Yes.
So I think that there are quite a number of, I think with that kind of argument that is segmented. The majority of people or majority of couples will find it hard reconciling to that setting, especially the women. I think the men would not mind not working, but still putting on the shorts or the but it doesn't happen. Psychologically, we're not cut out for the man to take a passive role and the woman still accost. So there's a respect issue that begins to have an effect on the relationship. And I don't think we are both, when we say we are transitioning, we sit down to have that conversation that in that transition where you could be the house husband and I could be the what do you call it? The one who brings in the cash. There could be issues with how we relate to each other. We must be prepared to deal with that follow. I think that has been the problem, in that we haven't developed the language and the psychological nous to have that conversation and let each party be comfortable in that space.
So before I go back to my conversation on accountability for women, I want to stay on this a bit more in terms of, so should we then be saying that if the gender roles are splitting and changing, and if there are things that a woman wants to do today, or a man wants to do today, a conversation needs to be had?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think the conversation is where you build on that. I think a lot of our issues, conflicts in marriage and in relationships is because we don't have the conversations. We are not equipped to have conversations.
That I agree. But let me hear your perspective of why we are not equipped to have conversations.
We're brought up not to be confrontational. I don't think that's confrontational in that there are difficult conversations that anybody in a relationship must have, whether in the work environment or in the domestic environment. Our culture is not direct. Our language is not direct. Our way of thinking and interacting is not direct. It's very indirect. But these conversations have to be direct conversations where you're vulnerable, where you put your everything on the line, and then you think through. And I don't think that we are.
So, would you say that's shifting with the new generation to a certain extent?
I think the new generation is interesting.
So you're why?
They're almost selfish in the way they want you to be at the receiving end of that conversation where they're direct, but they can't take it back.
I could see that.
So yeah, your nephew wants to come in front of you and tell you but when you tell him the truth back,
it doesn't go down that well. I mean, we all talk about how communication is a big part of how relationships are built, friendships are built, and so on. So I see where you're coming from. I also see the culture thing that you talk about in terms of our culture is you don't talk directly to an adult. You don't even look an adult.
You don't look an adult in the eye when you're talking. It's disrespectful to do that.
It's disrespectful to do that, right? So when
and then you precede your thing with sebi, right?
Yes. Or please, me pacho, or ofane, right? So I get that. Should we start thinking about how we hold each other a bit more accountable? And how do we do that?
I've been, as you probably right, I've been running away from this.
Answering it, and I'm bringing you back.
But she won't let me. She won't let me.
No.
Yes, but I think it cuts both ways. But more with the women. There are things that women do get away with, and before we answer whether to hold them accountable or not, I think I like to step back and ask why. Why do women get away with certain things? And I think there's globally that's true. If we want to set it here, they're cultural. So I feel like there are cultural reasons or historical reasons for it. Does it justify that? No. But I think that in order to cure that, we cannot just be woke and say this is wrong. We have to go back almost anthropologically to understand why the women are cut some slack when they do certain things and men are not. Because trying to...
Well, men are cut some slack in other areas.
In other areas. So in both ways, there are reasons, however unjustified or however unprogressive as we moved, it's not progressive anymore. But if you don't have the conversation about the why and the historical and the legacy and the anthropological reasons why we act, we will not be solving the problem. And so I ran away from it because I feel it will be a very superficial conversation unless we step back and understand.
So I hear you. And I understand that there is context to it. I think that sometimes something as simple as speaking up about the displeasure is a way of holding us accountable. Something as simple as that.
Speaking up about?
The discomfort of a woman being able to hit a man or beat a man up in his own home, but he wouldn't dare even defend himself. Or a woman deciding that I can verbally abuse a man and it's okay to do that, and a man won't defend himself, right? Because even in that defense, there is fear of what the repercussions are, both socially and sometimes even criminally, right? So the question is, do we begin to put the mirror up to us as women and say, it might not be 80% of women, but there's a small 5% or 3% of women or 10% or how many, I don't know what the stats are, that do this. And so this is how it makes us feel. Is it about a conversation? Is it accountability from the perspective of men being a bit more vocal? I'm just throwing it in there.
You're right.
Because I feel like you internalize everything. You don't like it, but you don't say you don't like it.
You're right. So speak up is, you speak up. Where I have a problem, so I've seen people speak up on an issue, but when you turn the issue, you make the converse of the issue, he doesn't get it because there's no thought behind the speak up.
Okay.
There's a rush to claim victimhood.
Okay.
And the person may be perpetrating the same thing in another sphere
Got it.
and is not totally conscious.
Got it.
So before you speak up, and when you speak up, you must be aware. So let's talk about you talking to your kid and your kid not talking back. You're not aware because you feel like you have a right to speak to the kid. You haven't thought about the issue where the kid has a right to speak to you. So you're saying, no, you know how to speak to me, and you are not realizing that on the flip side of it, you must also be aware and speak in a certain way. And I feel like a lot of the time when you say speak up in society, it's a one-way street.
Okay.
So I hear you. Yes.
But we talk all the time about men abusing women. All the time.
We don't talk about women abusing
We don't
men.
talk about women abusing men. And I think that's where my discomfort starts, right? And I have these conversations purely because I want us to start having conversations we don't have.
But that's true. But isn't it also true that, like you said, that you admitted earlier, that other issues that men also do?
But we're talking about women today. And then tomorrow we can talk about men, right? Today we're talking about women.
Okay.
And we're saying, because I can give you a tall list of things that men get away with, right? Men get away with hitting their wives all the time because you'd find that a woman lives in fear and she lives with a man who's abusive, mentally, physically, psychologically, all of that, right? We see men withhold affection, withhold support to their partners all the time. We see men being physically abusive. We see men have multiple relationships. We see men being uncommunicative. So I guess we're on the same page in the sense that both sides of the divide have challenges, right? But at the same time, you find that we talk a lot about, we have Dovsu. Mm-hmm. We talk a lot about women and their struggles, us women and our struggles. If I had a challenge with my partner or I had a challenge with my child, I know where to go to. The reality is that men do not have that. And even when they struggle with things, a lot of men do not necessarily speak up. So I know that this is the first of many conversations that we're going to have, but I think that maybe it's a conversation of just even creating a bit more awareness of the fact that, because sometimes, because the cultural norm, you just carry on with it. You just carry on.
So I was just having a conversation with my dentist. So here's
Okay.
what's interesting. My dentist was telling me about 3 days ago that you're under stress. And I said, why? And it said, your teeth, there's serrations on your teeth, which suggests that
You're grinding your
you're
teeth.
grinding your teeth. And nobody's ever told me that. I haven't made a sound. And he said, that's even worse because it means that it's all internalized. Okay. Right? And so this morning I was having a conversation with another friend and I was saying, this is happening. And he said, yeah, but we haven't created spaces in which men can have these conversations. So I agree that you probably need an agency like Dovsu, but more importantly, coming back to culturally, do we have the spaces where men can sit down and are men open to having these conversations about stress, or the cultural machismo that we are raised to channel prevents us from doing that? So there could be a cultural solution, and there could be an agency solution, a state solution. I think that if you ask me, the preference would be that a cultural solution.
I don't disagree with you at all, and I'll tell you why. So I had a guest on the show, and I was telling her a story. She talked about what she looks for in a partner. And she says it's really important. I mean, yes, she wants a man who, is doing well, believes in God, da-da-da. But one of the big highlights was she wants a man who has a community of friends. And we went back talking about how a lot of the time you can have 6 friends who are intertwined. They're married, they've got kids, or whatever it is. They go on holidays together, and every engagement is, hey bro, how you doing? I'm good, and that's it, right? And you have no idea what's going on, and then someone commits suicide, like, I didn't know that was going on with Kwame, or I didn't know Kwame felt a certain way about anything, right? So I agree with you that the first thing is a cultural thing where are we encouraging men to speak up or even share with other men? Are we saying to men, it's okay, you don't always need to have it all figured out? Because I think that years ago, women didn't communicate to each other as much because, you know, we always had that tear each other down perception that existed, right? Today,
It's changing.
it's changed a lot. Women talk to each other, they listen to each other, they inspire each other, they support each other, and they almost gang up against everybody else, right? So, and that's why I asked
If
the
you
question.
if you don't mind me asking, flip roles now. Why did that change? Why the change?
I think that it could be, and you can flip roles anytime, I'm fine with that, because you can interview me. I think that maybe we began to see that there is power and there's also a connection talking to another woman who understands where you are coming from. Maybe that's what it is. Because if you ask me, growing up as a teenage girl, I was a complete tomboy. And I didn't have real deep female friendships till my late 30s. But as I've developed some of that, my friend Audrey and I can talk for hours. And it's all about she understanding how I'm feeling about something or what I'm thinking about something without me having to offer a protracted explanation. So maybe it's just beginning to realize that there's power in someone who you can connect with, who understands things differently. That would be an assumption that I make, right? And maybe men haven't found that. Or men haven't felt safe with each other.
And men may never do that because we are cut out differently. We internalize.
True.
By definition. Society praises or society appreciates the traits of men where they are reticent and they are in control, and you know that's what society requires from us. So that exchange you have with your friend Audrey and the open, it may never happen, but we can do an iteration of that. Safe spaces. We will not talk for 2 hours or 3 hours, but we may talk for, I may just give my friend 10 seconds of what I'm, and then an advice, but it may not be that kind of
But
conversation.
that's a starting point.
That's a starting point.
That's a starting point where you're sharing a little bit more or being a little bit vocal. Because you know something, I have many male friends who have partners who don't work. And the reality is they don't like it.
The women or the men?
The men. It's almost like they feel burdened, they feel like they can't take a misstep. They feel like
if they do, everything
comes crashing down. And that pressure is significant. Yes, there are the men who use being the sole breadwinner as a control tool. That exists, but that's not, but I do know a lot of people who also feel, I just wish you'll do something, because if I drop dead today, my family would fall apart. And do women recognize that? Maybe we don't, maybe we do.
I think they do.
They do.
I think they do.
We do.
I think they do, but the pool of tradition is great.
Got it.
The pool of the context, the culture, the mindset, the thinking around, I'm going to dedicate my time to look after the kids, and it's women who raise kids. It's a strong pull. And there are narratives like yours where you're full-time and you're still raising kids.
Yeah.
Right? But I think it's the pool of tradition. It's the pool of men. We do not have that tradition.
I'll tell you a joke my friend and I were talking about just yesterday. So she came to visit me. We haven't seen each other maybe 7 years. And she's had so many significant life events, including a divorce, IVF, just a whole bunch of things that she's been navigating over the last couple of years. And we got talking about why a woman would stay in a relationship, right? Or why a woman would say, I want to stop working and be
The housewife.
a housewife. And she had this theory that made me laugh a lot. She said, we both had contributed it, but we narrowed it down to 3 things. We said, she might be genuinely tired, so she's thinking, I don't want to work anymore. Or maybe the kids are struggling, or she wants to pay a bit more closer attention to the kids, right? So she would say, I want to take a break from this so that I can pay attention to the kids and kind of be involved in their lives a little bit more deeply in their formative years. And the third one was because, you know what, there are all these chicks chopping your money. Let me come and sit at home so you look after me.
I've heard that.
You've heard that, right?
I've heard that.
Oh, yeah, right. So anyway, this was just a by the way thought. It's really been good having this conversation. It's good that we've had a conversation that is not entirely agreeable, because
Dissent is good. I love dissent.
Dissent is really good. I do wish that we begin to have a bit more about a conversation of men speaking up about the things that have an impact on them, and also men creating safe spaces for themselves, be it in the family or be it with other relationships they have with other men or even mentors and so on, right? I think it would be good as a way of holding up a mirror to us as women about the struggles that you feel. Because a lot of the time we only focus on, we're entitled. It's Bema die. This is what is required of you.
I hope I'm not, but the thought I'll leave you with, are the women ready when the men start being vulnerable and talking? Because I think that a lot of women ask for that, but they're not ready.
I can agree with you. But
I think they're not.
I can agree with you, but we do have to start from somewhere. And so where do we start from? And in parallel, how do we empower women to be ready for some of these conversations?
Good point.
We will have another conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you too. And now to the best part of this all is me making you a cocktail.
Okay.
So I'll make you a very tiny cocktail.
Tiny? I don't do tiny cocktails. It's not a cocktail, it's not. It's like a...
Oh, I'll make you a tiny drink.
Okay,
and then you tell me what you think about it.
All right, okay.
Okay, so like I said, to the fun part of this, I've made you a cocktail. The only requirement is for you to tell me one thing in the cocktail and get it right. You have 2 tries. So yes.
Okay, let's do this.
Maybe I do this with you first. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. There's alcohol.
Yes, there's alcohol in it. 1 try.
Trying to be smart, right?
Yeah.
There's something that I recognize, but
Let's see.
it's a name that escapes me. Is this sweet, winey alcohol? What's it called again? You give me the name and I'll... Somebody give me the name.
Nobody's giving you no name.
Oh, come on.
No.
Let me try one last time. I end up drinking everything before I give you a...
Drink a bit more. Drink up. It's the middle of the day, and I'm trying to make it as refreshing as possible, so you're not drunk. Well, we are not drunk since we are working today.
There's no Angostura here.
No.
Okay, I give up.
Thanks for coming. So it's got my
Shut that.